us today. Second session of the last day, Road to L&D 2023. Hope you enjoyed Heidi's session earlier. I think it's fantastic. Those the recording for that one should be available for you now if you want to go back and check it out after this session is over. But now I am happy to introduce you to Matthew Wheeland, who is going to be talking about how teaching prepared him for sales. And we wanted to have a session like this in the event because instructional design isn't necessarily the thing you have to go to after teaching. Of course, there are other options. And like we mentioned in Heidi's, like Raven last year when we did this, I think she went into customer enablement. And now Matthew is a senior account executive at Formative. He's a former classroom teacher of 7 years. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about his journey and more about Formative and, why instructional design might not necessarily be the right fit for you. So with that, Matthew, I'm going to go ahead and hide myself from the screen and let you take it away.
All right. Well, I'm very excited to be with you. I'm excited. I'm pleasantly surprised that there are people in the live session. My assumption was that 99% of people that signed up would just say, hey, send me the video. So very excited to see everybody here. Me being here feels like, y'all paid your ticket to get in and y'all went to the zoo. It reminds me of this experience where you go to the zoo and the main event is everyone wants to go see the lions. And then all of a sudden the veil goes back and there's a toucan bird that appears. That is me this morning. I am the toucan bird. Everyone is here to see the heavy hitters, the professionals in instructional design and learning development. And you've got a sales guy that shows up for a session. So I'm excited. I've got some things prepared for us. Not everyone wants to go into instructional design. Not everyone can go into L&D. And so I'm here to give you something a little bit different, a perspective to consider. So I'm going to share my screen here and walk us through my slides that I put together for us. Right on. So I'm going to okay, cool. I got navigation. We're good. So a little bit about me. I've been in sales for 7 years. I've done different types of sales. Now I'm on the ed tech side. I have a 7-year-old son, a human boy. I have a 7-year-old dog, Australian Shepherd. I have a 10-month-old Australian Shepherd, and then my wife of 2 years now. In fact, I know it's not fair that I talk about the Australian Shepherds and not show you photos of them because they're amazing. Here is my 10-month-old climbing on top of my 7-year-old. I was looking for pictures for this slide forever because it is so hard to find them relaxing and sitting in the space for a long time. They're actually on our couch in this photo. They recently lost couch privileges. They were revoked. Here is why. Here is our ring cam in the kitchen. You can see that my 10-month-old Australian Shepherd decided to learn a new skill, and that was climb on top of the cabinet or on the counter, and then just whatever was up there, she just decided that she could help herself to that. And then my wife has this little display here with little goodies and photos. The dog was knocking them over, so I thought, let me just move them. That was not enough. Then the dog learned how to reach really far and find them. So lost couch privileges, but those are important parts of my family. So here are the 3 things that I want to talk about today. Number 1, I want to tell you my story about leaving education and becoming a sales rep. Number 2, I want to paint a picture of what sales is really like. And number 3, talk about skills that I learned first from education. And I'll probably preface the third one by saying, yes, I believe teachers are superheroes. Yes, I believe they can do a lot of things. So when I say that I had skills that I learned in education, doesn't mean I came from the education world and was, ready to rock and roll and was the best salesperson ever or anything like that. It's just that I learned those skills first. They were little bitty muscles that I had formed in the classroom, and then they grew over time as I grew in my field and expertise. So, but I have to start by telling you my story of transitioning out of education. The two worst days of my life happened while I was an educator. I won't tell you the first one because if I spent the whole time talking about it, you'd be like, whoa, Matt, take it easy on the oversharing. We're just here for your session, save that for your therapist. So I'll just tell you the second worst day, which was in December of 2016. I'm teaching, the school day comes to an end, and there's a voice over the PA system, and they say, Mr. Wheeland, they're calling a teacher to the main office. Say, Mr. Wheeland, would you mind coming to the main office, please? And my first thought is, well, that's really weird that they're calling a teacher to the main office. But I mosey on down to the main office. I'm teaching in a private school. It's a little bit smaller. It's a faith-based organization. I walk to the office and I'm greeted in the main office area by who looks to me like a college intern. In his hand is a manila envelope. And if this is part of your story, you know exactly where I'm going with this. He says, "Are you Matt Wheelan?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "I'm here to serve you papers on behalf of, your wife. These are," and I realized these are divorce papers. That I had no idea this was coming. It was a surprise, no fault divorce. But I can say on December 12th, 2016, my life changed forever. I was a teacher. I was supporting myself and my son, who was one at the time in my first marriage, because I was making, I'll say it, I'm not that embarrassed about it anymore because it's behind me, but at the time it was pretty embarrassing. I was making $32,000 with a master's degree and 6 years of experience. I didn't teach math, but I started looking at the numbers and I realized this isn't going to work anymore for me. I can no longer continue to teach, provide for myself, go through a divorce, and all of this stuff. I just have to. So this was the day I was catapulted out into sales. My first job was as a car salesman. I did that for 2 years because no one else would hire me. I had no resume. I had no connections. I had nothing. It was just like, well, I got to find a job because I got to start paying the attorney, all the fees that I've got to do. So my life changed forever. Anyways, my perspective began to switch to how can I build a resume that will get me into a better sales job? And that was the perspective. So I did that for 2 years, then landed a B2B job, which I'll explain what that means in a second. And then eventually I made it into ed tech, where I am much, much happier. But it took me 4 years to do that. So let me illustrate what is sales. This isn't a dictionary.com definition. This is my definition, and it's helping people find the solution to their problems. That's simply it. There's just a cost transaction involved. Hey, you want to sell your problem, or you want to solve your problem? Here's the solution. Are we a good fit? Now, now there's a contract or an exchange of funds. So essentially that's what sales is, which is why as a former teacher, I got into education not to make a bunch of money, but to help people. And so I feel like in sales, I really feel like I'm helping people. So there's a lot of fulfillment in it for me. And then being in ed tech, as a previous teacher, we all know this. If you have that background, you're in front of the whiteboard, you feel like you're just changing the world one day at a time. Being in my world, I still feel like I'm contributing to that vision. A couple types of sales I want to introduce you to if you're unfamiliar with this landscape. There's something called business to consumer sales. A couple examples of this: retail, home security. Those are the people that knock on your door and try to sell you all the outside camera and automatic lights. The first type of sales I did, which was selling cars. Real estate can fit into this category, but it can fit into the other type of category, B2B sales. But typically, sales jobs like this are a one-time close, meaning like if you're in a retail environment, you have product in front of you, the customer comes in one time, it's your job to make them leave with the product. You're trying to sell. It's while you're here, buy this. Home security, they come and knock on your door. They're trying to get you to sign a contract before you leave. Selling cars, you come into the car dealership, they're trying to send you home in a car that day. And typically the buyer represents themselves. Here's why it's different when I did this, and I have a hybrid version of this, business to business. So for example, my first B2B job was in office solutions. I would knock on the doors of offices, walk in, ask to speak to the business manager or the office manager or the owner of the company, and I would ask a series of questions to figure out if they could benefit from the solutions that my company, sold. Medical products, technology, hardware, technology, software, these are all B2B sales jobs. And what's interesting about these is that the salesperson, myself, for example, I represent a company, and the buyer also represents their company, which is why it's called business to business sales. Typically, these sales are more complicated. The product needs to be customized to meet the needs of the company. And this requires multiple meetings, and it's a long process. Sometimes these sales last 3 months, sometimes 6 months, 9 months, or several years. So there's multiple internal meetings where the salesperson meets with the product experts and says, this is what's going on. This is what we need. This is what they need. Can we customize a product that meets them? There's a lot of misconceptions about sales. People sometimes think that salespeople are pushy, manipulative, and won't take no for an answer. You probably know the kind of salesperson I'm talking about. Funny, I'm actually thinking of the doctor's visit I recently had, because doctors are salespeople too. Lawyers are salespeople too. And this particular doctor, I'll tell you the story. It's a fact that married people tend to live several years longer than non-married people. I'm convinced one of those reasons is because, women sometimes being weird, they will inspect the body of their husband, and they will look for things like rashes, pimples. They find pimples, they will pop them. So I'm at the dermatologist because, she's like, I don't like that mole, on your shoulder or whatever. So I go to the doctor, and I felt like I was being sold. The doctor was pushy. He didn't really care about my story. He didn't really care about me. I mean, kind of cared. He wasn't the worst person in the world, but I really didn't want to go through with the process. And I felt like he was really trying to sell me his service. And long story short, I walked out of the office that day with a $400 bill because he convinced me to go ahead with the procedure that I didn't really want to do, but I knew my wife wanted me to do it. So I got it done that way. All right. So far I've covered my story leaving education. What is sales really like? And then number 3, I want to talk about skills that I learned first in the education world. And I want to do this by also telling a story. When I applied to Formative, if you guys are interviewing, there's a long process to getting a job like that. Number 1, there's a recruiter screening. I met with our sales manager. Then I turned around and met with the CEO and the CFO. We were a small company at the time. There were only like 20 of us. So it wasn't that big of a deal to meet the executive staff. But if you are trying to get hired anywhere, it's a pretty similar process. The titles might be different, but it's the same. So I went through all 4 stages, and then I got a long silence. And that silence is an uh-oh. It's like, uh-oh, did they forget about me? Or do they not want to hire me anymore and they're just hoping I go away? Or did they just have me like a scheduled email in 2 weeks and it's going to go out and say, sorry, you're not the right guy for the job. So what I did was I refused to go away. I really wanted the job. So I wrote an email to everyone I interviewed with. And here's what I said. I wanted this to be authentic, instead of me just listing skills. Let me just tell you about the email I wrote to these people. I said, during the past week or so, your team has had the opportunity to speak with some really great sales reps. At this point, I'd been selling for 4 years. So I'd built, an experience for myself, or, titles and numbers and all that. I'm sure you've talked to some really great sales reps that can create lots of revenue for your company. Here are 6 reasons why I think I can become a contributing member of your sales team. Hint, these aren't obvious by looking at my resume, but each one has been critical to my success. If I had to add a number 7, it would be that it taught me never give up. In sales, that means following up with prospects until they say yes or go away, you annoying salesperson, which I thought they might laugh at because that's exactly what I was doing to them right now. I was not going to go away until they told me to go away. We're no longer interested in you. And so I wrote them this chart. This is exactly the chart that I wrote them. Skill number 1, I learned in the classroom how to work independently. And here's kind of what I told them. I said, learning starts and ends with the teacher. My attitude and work ethic was responsible for productivity of myself and my students. In sales, it's up to me to make the calls. ask the questions, move the deal along, close the deal, especially in a remote selling environment. Skill number 2, how to work as a team. In education, each teacher reports their academic dean and principal. In sales, I report directly to my management. Number 3, how to run a discovery call. Asking questions to figure out what students already know and what they don't know is crucial. In sales, I create and ask questions that are designed to solve a prospect's problem. Number 4, how to demo, meaning how to show your product in a way that makes sense to the client and helps them understand, is this a good fit for me? Well, in education, I learned that you break long points into small digestible pieces. We call that chunking, and greatly helps students to pay attention and to digest what the learning concepts were. Number 5, how to sell through stories. It has been said if a rep can articulate a prospect's problem better than they can, the buyer will automatically assume the rep has the right solution. This was a data study that was produced by a sales company that I found fascinating. But if you can illustrate by telling stories, rather than just saying you need our product, you can say things like, your situation reminds me of this other customer that I have. Here's what our client who bought our product was looking for. This is why they bought our product, and these are the results that we've helped them accomplish. Number 6, how to improve. At the end of every lesson, we ask ourselves, how did it go? What worked? What needs to be made better? Now, since you're all here, I'm going to share 2 bonus skills. If I had to add other ones, these would be the 2 that I would add. Number 7, being in education, you learn how to become a product expert fast. And in sales, that's extremely important because they want you to begin selling immediately. They don't want you to start selling, you can't take 6 months before you start understanding the product. They want you to come in and make a difference as soon as possible. And a good company has an onboarding experience where you can learn the product and that sort of thing. And then number 8, how to create the wow, aha sales moments for my customers. And what I mean by that is that you want them to go, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear here, so I'll just censor myself. Oh, shoot. I don't, I didn't realize this product could do that, or I didn't know that I had that problem until you identified it for me. And that's what I think a good sales rep does. In the same way we did that as teachers, we made our students enamored by our content areas. The first part of a good lesson to me was the hook. How are you going to hook them in? How are you going to activate prior learning and connect it to new learning? How are you going to make what you're talking about captivating in that respect? And really, that's what I got for us today. Happy to hang around and answer Q&A in the chat. But if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, there is my that's me. I do see a chat that got pinged to me. Are you an extrovert? Do you think introverts can do well in sales? I would consider myself probably somewhere in the middle, introvert, extrovert. I would say I'm an introvert that knows how to push the extroverted buttons, if that makes sense. You have to be somehow entertaining to captivate a large crowd, but I do require those evenings by myself or go back to the hotel. If I fly somewhere, I go to the hotel and I just need some time to decompress. I'll pause there and in case our host wants to interject here.
Oh yeah, no, I saw there was a comment. I can't remember who made it after that question came up about how introverts just tend to require recovery. And I know for myself, I consider myself an introvert, but I used to do business development that was really, really busy, and it it required a lot of recovery time for me after I would go through meetings and close, especially. Yeah, I do think that I did well in sales. I mean, ridiculously well in sales, but it's definitely possible, I would say.
Right on. And my apologies to everybody being so great and interactive in the chat. I was so locked into looking at 2 screens, I didn't even realize what was here. So if you stuck around and waited for your question, thanks for tolerating me.
Absolutely. No, it was great. And here's another question for you.
Yeah.
As someone just starting the exploration of leaving teaching for corporate, when I see sales, I see quotas. Is this always the case as far as job security?
Yeah. So let me address the back half of that question first. Job security is a real thing. I'm speaking into the climate right now that just saw what 13,000 people go at Google, 18,000 at Amazon, 10,000 at Microsoft, 5,000 at Twitter, 7,000 at Meta. My numbers are probably off a little bit, but job security is a real thing in the corporate world, and your job isn't always guaranteed. So I would say there's strategies to make yourself more job secure. Usually the closer you are to the core product and the closer you are to the transaction in that product are typically the two safest places to be, unless you're an executive. Executives usually, make it through cuts. Uh, but if you can make yourself a key contributor to the product, making it better, fixing it when it breaks, you're usually pretty safe. The company needs you. And if you're out there on the front lines, i.e., sales, and you're doing an okay job,
I understand.
thanks Siri, usually they want to keep you along because nothing happens until somebody sells something. Is the old saying. But I would say the quota, yeah, it's how they measure, is a sales rep efficient and good at their job. Now, a good manager knows the quota doesn't tell the whole story, but it tells a lot of the story. But even in teaching, there are metrics, right? Like you're being observed in the classroom, and they're writing on their little notebook, 0 through 4. How are you doing? Are you exceeding expectations? Are you above? Metrics in the corporate world work very similarly. You're harder to get fired. It's harder to fire bad teachers than it is bad employees in the corporate world.
Nice. All right, next one. So I'm going to ask, can you tell us a little bit more about formative? And then Michelle has this question, a day in the life. Would you
Yeah,
share?
so formative was built by our founder. He was a previous seventh grade teacher, wanted a way to better tag and track standards and monitor student progress. So he was in Teach for America years ago, where he developed his product in the classroom. It's grown since then. Really, our product took off during remote learning. We were designed to be used in the classroom, but in remote learning, the number one problem was, how do we know everyone's teaching to a blank screen? Students' cameras are off, and teachers are just kind of like, all right, everybody, who's here, who's really here, and are you really learning? One of the key questions was, how do we know if the students are engaged and actually learning the lesson that we're teaching? And formative just happens to be, in my opinion, the best at answering that question, because our question and answers are live. You can see it immediately. You can tag and track it to state standards. And I think it's, I'm biased, but I think it's a pretty fantastic solution. It's a great fit for a lot of districts. As far as a day in the life, I try to keep a little bit of variety, but my principles are, I want to prioritize the most important things, which to me are meeting with people looking to buy our product. I want to be available for them at any given time. And I got to keep, marketing. It's their job to kind of get those people to me, but I've got to go out and find people. So whether I'm posting on LinkedIn or writing emails to, assistant superintendents or directors of technology, people that I think like, hey, I wonder if we can be a good fit for you. Would you be open to a conversation? I have a colleague that I work very close with. And so we're always interacting and trying to help our current customers as well.
Any similarities between your life as a teacher and your life now doing sales?
I can tell you one obvious similarity to me. It's designing a learning experience. So as a teacher, my goal was, whatever my standard was, I want the student to be able to XYZ. Well, eventually I want my prospect to buy product. And so how can I do that? Well, let me unpack that a little bit more. before they can buy it. They want to understand it. They want to see it meet their needs. And I design a 45-minute conversation. I ask very strategic questions to lead us to that goal. And then the question asking and the really listening, and the needs analysis is like diagnostics a lot in teaching. Those are some right off the top of my head.
Nice. And I had somebody before I got into sales myself. Someone had told me that in sales you have more control over your own destiny. Would you say that's the case in your situation now? And is that very different from when you were a teacher?
The first part of the question I lost a little bit. Was it that sales has a little bit of control over their destiny?
Yeah, yeah. Sales gives you the opportunity to have more control over your own destiny.
Well, I shared, and again, I hope I didn't overshare at the beginning, but there was a financial component to me. I needed to be able to. I had a number that I needed to be able to make, so I needed to go get that number. In sales, you can control that. There's the dream jobs are the ones that pay a high base salary and then reward the heck out of you when you bring in really great deals. But when I first started, it wasn't that way. I had a $0 base salary. It was either I'm selling today or I'm making $0 today. And so that's how I got my start. I had to have a scrappy attitude about it and just do the best I could. It took several months for me to learn. I had to ask a ton of questions. I shadowed a lot of really good reps. And if I can just be factual about it, I'm sorry if this sounds whatever, but after 3 months, I started getting the hang of it. And at month 6, I was our number one rep at the dealership that I was at. And I was competing against like 20 reps. Many of them had been there for 2 years, 8 years. We had one guy for 10 years who was the number one rep for something like 20 consecutive months. And I just worked as hard as I could, built the skills that I could, and tried to demonstrate my value to the company. So yeah, you have a little bit of control. And sorry, one other thing on that, I could just think back when I was teaching, and I'm sure that the people on this call, if they're in education, they can relate to the frustration of knowing I'm the best teacher in my department, or I'm the best teacher in down this entire hallway. Yet you're compensated exactly the same as the worst teacher in your department. You're compensated the same as the worst teacher in your hallway. That never really sat well with me. I felt like good, you should make a little bit more. If you're really good, you should be compensated accordingly. I know it's really debated of how to do that. I know some states that have done it though.
Right, right. Well, Matt, I would probably buy a car from you just after this session. All right, one more question. How did you upskill? Something formal, or through books and YouTube?
Uh, Good question. So I would say all of the above. Number one, I do listen to podcasts. I do read books. I listen to books. I'll share a story. There was one point in my career where I felt stuck. This was before I got into ed tech, and I really didn't know what to do. I think I've got the book right here. I don't want to be boring and look for the whole thing. I thought it was just right here. I'm sorry, it was anticlimactic, but it was a book, your MBA handbook or something like that. And I was like, at this point, I felt stuck, and I wasn't sure which way to go. So I was like, I can either go get another master's degree and kind of cheat the system and jump into a company at a higher level, or I can keep selling and just go into a different industry. And I got a call from an ed tech recruiter in April of 2020 that changed my life. I said, "Hey, we like your experience." And that was I hadn't had anybody tell me that. I was used to in the sales world, they're like, "You were a teacher before this?" I didn't make sense to people. People didn't understand my story. They didn't understand the skill set. So for someone to say, "No, we actually I was used to talking around my teaching experience and almost seeing that as like an obstacle to getting a job." And I got a call from someone that said, "No, we like your numbers. You've sold. You have some certificates and awards. and we like the fact that you're this. Now, long story short, I was the runner up for that job, but it introduced a pivot for me where I thought, I didn't let me explore this new area. And then I ended up over here about 3 years ago, and, very happy.
Nice. Nice. Let's see. Rich is asking, how much travel time away from your family do you encounter in your role?
Depends on the company that you're at. I can answer it from my perspective, of course, but different companies and different roles will treat this entirely different. So I remember I interviewed for a role a couple years ago before I took this job, and it was for a medical device company, which to me, that was the path that I wanted. I wanted to get out of. I went from car sales to B2B office solutions, and I wanted to transition. Next step to me was the healthcare world. I wanted to sell either pharmaceutical products or medical devices. So I landed an interview at a medical device company, and they said, Matt, here's the job, here's the pay. I said, all of that sounds really great. And I said, talk to me about travel. Because I had only, at that point, I was only doing day trips or traveling very close by. I could be back with, I could beat my wife home from work. I was never doing overnights. And the leadership told me, we want you overnight staying somewhere, forget the exact number, X 3 days a week or something like that. It ended up being 1/3. And when I calculated it, I was like, this just doesn't work for me. So it was going to be something in the realm of like 10 business overnights a month. That I was uncomfortable with. My wife had just moved from Florida up here to South Carolina where I live. It didn't make sense at the time. Now, if I was a single guy, it would have been a totally different story. I would have embraced the travel. It would have been great. Fast forward to now, I travel 2 overnights per month. And that's not a hard, fast rule. I don't have a manager that tells me this is what you have to do. In that first job I just described, they said, this is what you want. This is what we want you to do. And it just didn't compute with me, and it didn't line up where I was at in life. But that's where I'm at now. I voluntarily took on quite a bit of travel for this upcoming February and March. So I'll probably do between those 2 months something closer to, I don't know, 15 overnights in those 2 months. That's more than I usually do, but there's some great conferences and some great events that I really want to be at.
All right, that is great. Wow. I think this was really educational, and I love that you've shared a potential opportunity to everybody out there that is transitioning away from teaching. Something that they can look at and maybe go into. So Matt, thanks for being a part of this event and for sharing your story. It's wonderful. Yeah, and everybody, I know that Matt's LinkedIn profile was posted. I mean, link to his URL to his profile was posted a couple times in chat. So find that and connect with him there. And with that, I don't see any other questions. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and close out the session. We've got 2 more left for today. Allison's going to be talking about resume and portfolio tips, and then John is going to be talking about interview techniques and tips for transitioning L&D professionals. With that, thanks again, Matt. Everybody, we'll see you in the next one. Don't forget those tables are active. I'm not sure if Kara is still out there, but probably is. And we'll see everybody in the next one. Bye, everyone.